Okay, let's just jump right in. What if one of the biggest, most well-known concepts in all of modern psychiatry wasn't a scientific discovery at all, but, well, a scientific delusion? It's a pretty wild question, I know, but that's exactly what we're digging into today, challenging the very foundation of what most of us think we know about schizophrenia. So, where are we getting this from? Our guide for this whole explainer is a really thought-provoking book called, fittingly, Schizophrenia, A Scientific Delusion. It's by Mary Boyle, who's a professor of clinical psychology. And for today, we're going to stick just to the core argument she built in the very first two chapters. And really, this one question, it's the key to everything we're going to talk about. This isn't some small academic nitpick. No way. It forces us to put on our detective hats, to go all the way back to the very beginning of this whole concept and look at the evidence like it's the first time. All right, so let's really frame this up. Before we even touch the history books, we need to get our heads around why. Why does Mary Boyle even use a term as strong as scientific delusion? What's the fundamental issue she's pointing to that, honestly, most of us probably just skim right over? I mean, think about it. For most of us, for you and me, schizophrenia is just a fact, right? We hear about it all the time, in the news, in movies. It's talked about as a brain disease, a solid medical condition. And that's our starting point here. That's what pretty much everyone assumes. But this is where Boyle steps in and says, whoa, hold on a minute. She argues that all those conversations about genetics or brain scans, well, we're kind of jumping the gun. In her own words from the preface, she says those kinds of answers simply will not do because they skip over a much more basic, fundamental problem. Is the concept of schizophrenia itself even scientifically valid? Okay, so that's a huge claim, right? How do we even begin to figure out if she has a point? Well, first things first, we need to set some ground rules. It's like, if we're going to call something scientific, what does that actually mean? What boxes does it have to tick? So, using the framework from chapter 1 of her book, let's put together a kind of scientific scorecard to see. All right, first up on our scorecard is this term, hypothetical construct. Now, this sounds complicated, but it's not, I promise. It's absolutely key. Think about gravity. You can't see gravity, right? It's not a thing you can hold. But what you can see is a consistent pattern. Stuff falls down. So we create this idea, this construct called gravity, to explain that pattern. And in the world of science, schizophrenia is meant to be one of these hypothetical constructs. And when one of those patterns shows up in medicine, we have a special name for it, a syndrome. And the two words you really got to hang on to here are meaningful and recurring. This means it's not just a random jumble of symptoms, it's a specific group of signs and symptoms that pop up together over and over again in a way that actually means something. So this puts it all together. This is the scientific playbook, the proper process, and the order here is everything. Step 1, you observe a real recurring pattern. Step 2, only after you've seen the pattern do you come up with a hypothetical construct to explain it. And step 3, you create clear rules that tie your new concept back to what you originally saw. In science, you can't just mix and match these steps. The order is absolutely non-negotiable. Okay, so if you take one thing away from this section, let it be this. Everything, and I mean everything, depends on step 1. Before you can give something a name, before you can research its causes, before you can create treatments for it, you absolutely must have demonstrated, scientifically, that a real reoccurring pattern actually exists in the first place. If you don't have that, the whole thing is just a house of cards. You're building on sand. All right, so we've got our scientific scorecard ready. We know the rules of the game now, so let's do it. Let's go back in time, to the very beginning of this whole story, and ask one simple but massive question. When the concept of schizophrenia was first created, did it actually follow these rules? And Mary Boyle is really clear about why this trip back in time is so important. Her argument is powerful. She says that the whole process of diagnosing someone today is basically meaningless if the concept wasn't set up on solid scientific ground in the first place. The entire building rests on that one single foundation stone. So what's the official story? The one most of us have heard. It usually goes something like this. Back in the late 19th century, a German psychiatrist named Emil Kraepelin was observing his patients. He supposedly discovered a unique pattern of symptoms that always seemed to lead to a mental decline. He named it dementia praecox, which was basically the original name for what we now call schizophrenia. But here's the million-dollar question that Chapter 2 throws at us. Did Kraepelin really demonstrate that a meaningful, consistent pattern existed? Did he actually do the work for step one? Or was the pattern just sort of declared to be real without the proof to back it up? So, what Boyle does in her historical analysis is go right back to the source, to Kraepelin's actual writings. And she's not trying to judge him by today's crazy high-tech standards. Not at all. She's looking for the absolute bare minimum, the most basic scientific requirement. Did he show his work? Did he provide evidence that a recurring pattern was actually there? Because, as she points out, if you can't even meet that low bar, you can't really claim your concept is scientific. And the conclusion she comes to after digging through the historical record is pretty staggering. That crucial first step, the one where you actually prove a valid recurring pattern exists, it was just skipped. It never actually happened. So this leads us to the big so what question, right? This is maybe the most important part of all. If that foundation stone was never even laid, if the whole concept is built on shaky ground, what on earth does that mean? What are the implications for an idea that has literally shaped modern psychiatry and affected millions upon millions of people's lives? This really boils it all down to a simple side-by-side. On the one hand, you have the common belief. Schizophrenia is a valid scientific syndrome that was discovered through observation. That's the story we know. But on the other hand, you have Boyle's argument that the absolute minimum scientific requirement for making that claim, showing a real, meaningful pattern from the start, was never actually fulfilled. And if that's true, the implication is just huge. It suggests that the concept of schizophrenia wasn't a discovery at all. It was an invention, an idea that was just assumed to be valid right from the get-go, completely sidestepping the scientific method that was supposed to prove it. And so that leaves us with one last, pretty unsettling question to chew on. If the very foundation of this concept is as unstable as Boyle's historical analysis suggests, then what does that mean for everything that's been built on top of it for the last 100+ years? All the research, all the theories, all the treatments, what does it mean for all of that?